All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining Open Source Friday India live stream. I'm Karan, and I'm the Director for International Developer Relations at GitHub. But before we get started, where's everyone joining in from? So why don't you just drop a comment here as to where you're joining in from? A good, nice hello world. Um, and other things in the comment as well. That's nice. All right. Bengaluru, of course, quite a few of us are joining in from Bengaluru as well. And I'm sure many of the folks joining in from across various different places as well. From Nigeria, oh wow, that's interesting. Um, and folks joining in through various different locations as well. That's great. That's great. Well, before we get started, I want to say thank you all for joining. And this is one of the first streams that we are doing in the many of the open source Fridays that we do, showcasing a whole lot around what's happening in the open source ecosystem and also highlighting people, projects, maintainers, and various other folks from the ecosystem in India and various places as well. So today is special because this is the first stream that we are getting started with. And today we have with us, one person who many of the folks would have heard of in the ecosystem in India. And he's Dr. Kailash Nadh. And Kailash is the Chief Technology Officer of Zerodha and has also co-founded various other foundations like the FOSS United Foundation, etc., and someone who is very, very interested and also a big supporter of the open source ecosystem in India. So let's bring on Kailash onto the stream. Hi, Kailash.
Hi, Karan.
How are you doing?
I'm all right. I'm all right. Thank you.
Great, great. Thanks so much for joining in. It's really great to have you here. And the next few minutes, really want to spend some time going over a whole lot of things around open source, etc. But before we get started, anything that you want to share about what you do to our audience?
Yeah, I'm an open source developer hobbyist myself. I've been working on open source projects for a very long time. I think this is my 25th year uh, of writing open source tools. I think, or maybe 24th. I can't recollect, but yeah, it's been quite a while. I also had technology at Zerodha. We are a financial technology organization based out of India, and I volunteer quite a bit, spend a lot of my personal time in the FOSS community in India, participate in all kinds of FOSS events, and generally enjoy working on open source projects practically on a daily basis.
That's nice. That's nice. And for folks who want to kind of know a little bit more, you can check out Kyler's GitHub profile as well on github.com/knon. Um, Great. And one other thing for all of us joining us live. This is of course live. So if you have any questions or any comments that you want to ask Kailash or us, etc., feel free to just drop it in the comments, and throughout the conversation, we'll bring up any questions that we have. So Kailash, you mentioned that this is probably the 24th or 25th year of working in open source, etc. So curious to know, where did it all start from? What was the beginning like, and what was your motivation? Do you remember the first project that you worked on, etc.?
In fact, I do. I think I vividly remember uh, when I got into open source, I didn't really know what open source was. In fact, I participated in open source for a couple of years before realizing that I was in the open source community, before understanding what it was all about. It really started off with uh, my getting really lucky, getting a personal computer when I was in my early teens. I think it was the year 2000. Yeah, it was the year 2000. And I was always tinkering, fiddling around. Before I had a personal computer, I was tinkering with little gadgets, science stuff, electronics. So I was always a tinkerer. So when I got my personal computer, it was just natural progression from hardware tinkering to software tinkering. And I didn't really understand the idea of code or software, but that also happened by complete happenstance. I was doing something and I figured that changing values in an ini file, I think this was Windows 98 system, would change the behavior of certain programs. So I think for me, that discovery in itself was very fundamental, elementary, that it is possible to control stuff by changing stuff. And then I started digging in and eventually figured out the idea of coding, that you can write scripts. You can write little scripts and it changes the behavior of programs. And then when I got a dial-up connection, again, stroke of luck, this was again the year 2000, I started going on the internet, started browsing, slowly started digging into this idea of scripting and changing behavior of programs, and figured out that it's called coding, programming. So I started copy pasting code from the internet. This was before Git, this was before GitHub or any large platforms. And yet there were communities. There were communities of hackers where people would post code snippets and others could download, copy paste, change, improve, and post it back. So it literally, for me, started with copy pasting stuff from the internet, code from the internet to learn, and improving it and pasting it back. And I did it. I did this. Earliest scripts that I wrote were in Perl, and there was Visual Basic 6, VB4, VB5, VB6, etc. And then it clicked, and I started writing little utilities and programs and posted dozens and dozens of things on the internet without understanding that I was even participating in the open source community or the activities that were happening in the ecosystem. I think a couple of years later, slowly, I built an understanding of what open source means. It's the legal side of it, GPL and whatnot, the licenses. And I think 2001, I released my first proper open source project. It was a blogging platform called B Machine, and it had GPL as its license, because by then I'd figured that, oh, you need to attach a license. That's how it all works. So it was pretty organic. It was very natural, and it was a lot of trial and error. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
Thanks. That's great. So thinking about all of the contributions that you did in terms of scripts, in terms of also some of the work that you have already done, right? So what was like that first real project that you remember working on, that, okay, I have this idea and something that I really want to build, but at the same time, make it open source so that folks can build on top of it, use it, etc.?
I think it definitely would be B Machine, the blogging platform. It came before WordPress, that I remember. Before WordPress, there was this system called B2, and there was B2 Evolution, and WordPress was an extension, a fork of these platforms. This was the early days of the blogosphere, as we used to call it back then. Blogs were becoming really popular. Individuals were setting up blogs, universities were setting up blogs. So for some reason, I got really interested in the idea of internet publishing, and I built this system, B Machine, in PHP. It was a self-contained system. It, in fact, had a lot of really cool features. This was 2002 or 1. You could install templates. There were theme packs. There were language packs. There were emoji packs, little GIFs, smiley packs, categories, posts, syndication. B Machine instances could ping each other. So it was quite a serious project, and it became really big. I remember some really large universities in the US using B Machine as their official blogging platform. And I think there were several lakh instances of B Machine at some point out there. I think there were lakhs of people who, in fact, installed. If you remember, there were tons of shared hosting providers back in the day. Companies like HostGator. I remember dozens and dozens of hosting platforms had integrated B Machine into their offerings, where they'd allow you to just install and set up your blog with one click. And I was building it sitting. I mean, I was going to school, coming back in the evening, building it, sitting in my bedroom in my home, and it, like I said, it became quite big over the next 3+ years. So that was a pivotal moment for me because I understood what it means to be in charge of a large open source project. I understood what success means in terms of an open source projects that you put out there, the responsibility that you feel that you have to take when people start depending on your software. So it was a big life lesson, and everything else that I've done has been was really built on top of the lessons from that one big project, which got really really big. Yeah.
So it was not just building something, but also learning a whole lot from it and collaborating as well, and maintaining it, right?
Absolutely. There was a very active forum. The forum also was self-hosted, PHP
Oh,
which was a
nice.
big deal back in the day.
Yes,
So we had
yes.
a very active community around B Machine. People had feature requests, bug reports, all kinds of things, user contributions. This was pre-GitHub.
Wow, that's really nice. So after that, how did Zerodha happen?
Oh, I mean, Zerodha happened many, many years later, again by sheer coincidence. So, in the mid 2000s, I left India to attend university. I got a scholarship. I ended up in the UK. I did a BSc Computer Science there. Then again, by sheer coincidence, another opportunity opened up. Got another scholarship. Ended up doing a PhD. So I spent 6 years there in the UK, and I'd gone there to study. So when the studies ended, I came back. I'm from Kerala. So I came back to Kerala with no particular plans in mind, but it was very clear what I wanted to do. I wanted to sit at home and build stuff that I felt like building. So it was probably a really stupid decision logically back then, saying no to so many opportunities, saying no to everything, and just coming back to, of all places, Calicut, small little city in Kerala, India. So I come back. This was 2012, 11, and I immediately regret because the internet sucked. Then somebody, again by sheer coincidence, my cousin who was in Bangalore, he told me that Bangalore has good internet. So I literally just moved to Bangalore overnight. So it was all a series of coincidence. Because he happened to be in South Bangalore, I moved to South Bangalore. I had no concept of Bangalore's geography. I didn't really understand what South North was or JP Nagar Jayanagar was. So it happened, and then, through a series of coincidences, bumped into Nitin, who also happened to be uh, within like the walking distance of where I was hanging out. And I was trying to build this fintech app with a couple of my friends who had a background in finance. I have no background in finance. And in the course of that, we met Nitin, who happened to be across the road. That's how we met. Otherwise, it wouldn't have
Oh.
happened. And then we decided to work together. So this idea that me and my friends were working on, that didn't work out. But Nitin and I kept chatting. We hit it off. There was great philosophical alignment. And then 2000, yeah, I think late 2012, we set up Zerodha Tech and slowly started building Zerodha into a tech company. And that's what, again, we've been doing ever since. So series of coincidences, completely unplanned.
Nice, nice. Uh, you mentioned setting up Zero.Tech and then kind of getting started. And we've heard, multiple times also that a whole lot of open source culture exists when it comes to Zerodha Tech, and how you build, and also just the usage and the contributions back, etc. So can you share a little bit more about that? How did you kind of bring across some of that learnings that you had, and also using and bringing back that contribution culture as well into Zerodha?
See, I started writing code when I was around 13. And without even realizing, open source is what enabled me to copy, paste, and tinker and learn. If people hadn't shared stuff, I wouldn't have been able to learn stuff. So, and these were very, very formative years. Like I said, 13. So I only had one mental model of building technology, taking open source stuff, building stuff on it, releasing open source stuff. Anything beyond that always felt very, very unnatural to me. And that was the only thing I knew really, and that was the only thing I cared for. So when we set up Zerodha Tech, the most obvious choice, the only way I knew how to build tech was to download the best programming language, download the best database of the internet, download the best framework, stitch it together, build whatever you want, and then you contribute back whatever you can. So that was and is my mental model. So that's the only way we would have built Zerodha Tech. It wasn't a strategic decision, wasn't a business decision. It was just a logical, personal, philosophical decision. How else do you even build technology, right? But that's what everybody does anyway. Every company out there uses the best programming language downloaded from the internet, the best database, the best framework, front end, back end. It's all open source. So this is how we started. We started downloading the highest quality, best piece of open source technologies out there, started stitching it together to build Zerodha brick by brick from scratch. We had zero tech back then. And in the process, it's the FOSS philosophy to take and give, and whatever we could contribute back. And so it's a heavily regulated industry that we are in, right? So any financial technology you build is extremely heavily regulated. So it can't be like the DevOps ecosystem where you take a tool, build a tool, you turn it into a reusable module, you put it out there. It's not that simple. So we started publishing open source back, whatever we could. As we started making profits as an organization, we started supporting projects financially, small little things, whatever we could. And because culturally, that's us, that's me, that's the organization's culture, that's the tech team's culture. The people who came in were also selected for the right kind of cultural alignment. People with hobby projects, people with a knack for open source. So all of us, many of us from the tech team contribute code out there very frequently as open source hobbies. And as an organization, we do whatever we can, be it financial fund, support for open source projects, be it anything, be it evangelism, eventually be it setting up setting up of FOSS United, the non-profit, to promote open source in India. So it was there from day one. It's going to be there as long as we're all around at Zerodha. Yeah.
That's great. So when you were kind of initially building, right, you mentioned that when the team was selected as well, it was largely around their culture of working in open source or kind of understanding that. Back when you started building, how easy or how difficult was it to find the kind of developers who can work very easily with open source technologies and or also kind of give back and contribute to open source?
If you look at the numbers, if we get, I'll cite this example. Last year, we have a careers portal on Zerodha. That's the only place where we advertise any openings that we have. That's also we've stopped now at this point. Last year, we posted an opening saying we are looking for a junior front-end developer with front-end experience. I think within 24 hours, we had like 15,000 applications, and we just had to shut it. We had to kill that whole thing, and we had to look for somebody via referral. Back in 2012, when I was trying to hire the first engineer, I posted on HasJob, HasGeeks job portal that was quite big back in the day. And I got several dozen applications. And Zerodha was nothing back then. We were nobody. And it's a very unfashionable industry, right? But I'd say that 1 or 2% of the applications back then, or 1 or 2% of the applications of the 12,000 that we received today, had the knack. So what I'm trying to say, and that's like 13 years ago. What I'm trying to say is, if you look at the numbers, it's always just 1-2% of the candidates who have alignment towards the values that we are looking for. That proportion hasn't really changed. Times have changed, technologies have changed, everything has changed in that sense. But the proportion remains. So it was as easy or difficult it was back then for us as it is now. So you look at the resumes, you look for certain signals, you look for open source projects that people have published. If somebody has a personal homepage, that's a green flag. So you shortlist them, then you have one-on-one personal conversations with them, and then you narrow down. There's no whiteboarding, there's no lead code exercises. We don't do any of those things. So that's, yeah, so I can't really quantify if it's easier or difficult, but this is how we've done it. This is how we did it, 13 years ago. This is how we do it now.
Got it. That's helpful. Switching gears, a bit, Kailash. You mentioned about the FOSS United Foundation as well, etc. And you've been, very, very active in the open source ecosystem, be it through the FOSS United Foundation and starting that, really helping with the ecosystem itself, be it on the maintainer side, the project side, or people who are just getting started, even say with students, etc. What's your suggestions or advice to a whole lot of these audience, especially the developers, be it across the student ecosystem, or professionals, or people who are even looking to kind of like break into open source? What are your suggestions on how folks can really be a part of the ecosystem, and contribute, or even use and adopt and help everyone?
I think looking for projects to contribute is a difficult chase. Looking for ideas to build on is an even more difficult chase. What has worked for me, and if you look at the foundation of most open source projects out there, what has worked for them is the understanding of a certain problem that one can relate to. So I think one should look for problems around them. Everybody has problems. If you're interacting with a computer, or if you're interacting with something in the real world, there's something that nags you every day. You wish that, oh, this damn thing, if only it had a solution, or if only it had an easier way of doing. So you look for those problems that nag you or nag people around you. And if you have the inclination and the skills and the patience to maybe try and build a small little software solution, if it is a problem that can have a software solution, that's where it really starts. I can say that pretty much all my projects, the significant majority of my open source projects have stemmed from frustration. There's that one frustrating problem that really, really bugs me. One day, I'm like, okay, you know what? Screw it. I'll just work on something. I'll build something that solves it. This has been the origin story of most of my projects, that I build solutions to problems that have bugged me. And when you build it, then you get into the flow. Then you realize, okay, you can tweak this thing in a certain way where it becomes useful to others, because rarely are problems unique. The problem that bugs me, I'm pretty sure bugs millions of people out there. Then you productize it and put it out there, and that becomes your open source project. So that is something that you create. And if you look at pretty much any open source project out there, it's always somebody getting really pissed off with the problem and building a solution. Or it could be that one tool that you use every day that you really appreciate. Could be an open source tool, could be an editor, could be whatever. And you notice a certain problem with it. There also you can participate. That's how you participate in an existing project. You report it, you document it, or you try and fix it yourself and send the contribution back. But if you open a piece of open source software and start by asking yourself, okay, what do I do now? Where do I contribute? That's going to be a futile pursuit. So you should look for problems. That's a great starting point. And everybody has problems, no matter how trivial. Maybe the solution to a problem is a simple script. That's okay. That's how you can start. So look for problems and then build solutions for them and turn them into reusable solutions that you share with the world.
That's really great. In fact, that's one of the things which I share with a whole lot of developers as well, as to picking up something that would be there in your just either daily life, or even as you're coding along. That, hey, probably this library, it would have been nice if there was this feature that was there. Maybe not a nice to have, but just like how you said, a frustration that this doesn't work in this way. Anecdotally, that was how my first open source contribution was as well, where I realized that one of the libraries I was using wasn't supporting the architecture that I needed for my builds, etc. So I could find that on GitHub, and then I was like, okay, let me probably just make a contribution to add that upstream, while I can use a patched fork version as well for me to build on, etc. So kind of picking up that problem that you might have and then trying to address that, and building it in open source and contributing back, and then that's something which could start helping a lot of folks.
Yeah, and it can have completely unpredictable, even exponential impact. I'll cite one example. 2010, I remember I'm a Malayalam speaker. I'm from Kerala, right? I was frustrated by the lack of an online English Malayalam dictionary. You put that word into Google and say and add and suffix Malayalam meaning to it, and you'd hit that query, and you'd land on some spammy website with the meaning buried somewhere in the web page, surrounded by 50 ads. This was something that bugged me for years. In 2010, I got really pissed off. I opened a text file and I typed up like 5,000 English words and added Malayalam meanings to it. Whatever I knew, and I consulted whatever physical dictionary I had access to. And then I thought, okay, I need to extend this. Let me turn this into a simple web app and publish it out there so that I can use it, others can also use it, because I knew that many others would have had the same frustration. So I built Olam. It's an open source, open data English Malayalam dictionary, and published it in 2010, and enabled crowdsourcing where people could submit and I'd review and add words. So this is the 15th year of Olam, and it has 2.5 million users that use it every month. 2.5 million Malayalam speakers depend on Olam dictionary, and it has spawned a whole ecosystem of language-related initiatives, other dictionaries, and the project that I'd like to show today, DictPress, in itself came from this one thing. So one frustration that really pissed me off, the lack of a dictionary, and the solution that I built has taken a life of its own, which I didn't foresee. I just built it as a simple web app utility. But that's how problems are. Once you create a solution, people flock to that solution because everybody has that problem.
That's great that you mentioned about it, because one of our viewers in the comments actually asked this very specific question as to what was the context in how you got some of these ideas around open source tools for spoken languages and open indexes for the web, etc. So it's very, very interesting, Kailash, the projects that you worked on, because of course, like how many of us know, India is very, very diverse when it comes to languages, and making it much more easier for everyone with the help of open source and technology is something that would be great. So Kailash, can you show us one of those projects that that you have built or worked on in open source, and how it works or what it does?
Yeah, I'd like to show DictPress. That
Sure.
is a language tool. Shall I share my screen?
Yes, please.
Just a second.
So meanwhile, folks, if you have any questions for Kailash as well, feel free to drop them here in the chat, and then we can bring it up during the course of the conversations as well. All right.
I've shared my screen. Can you see it?
Yes, Kailash, we can see it.
So this is the Olam dictionary. It's an English to Malayalam and Malayalam to Malayalam dictionary. This UI that you're seeing here is rendered by this open source tool called DictPress, which I built. I'll quickly just show you an example. So in the process of building this UI, the suggestions that you're seeing here, simple auto suggest, type as you go suggestion thing, that's another JavaScript library that I wrote because I was really pissed off with the overly bloated JS libraries out there. So this is just 400 bytes, and I think it's called autocomplete.js. It's on my GitHub profile. So once you start building something, more and more little things spawn from it. So this is how it looks. It's a very easy to use dictionary. You see the English word and you see the definitions. It has the phonetic notation, pronunciation here. This says noun, which is noun, which is the part of speech tag. So it has basic grammatic information also. So all this data that you see here in Olam Dictionary was crowdsourced. Now this is Alar. This is a Kannada English dictionary. Now, because I got really interested in dictionaries and I felt that every Indian language, every Indic language should have an open data, open source dictionary like Olam. In the pursuit of that, I met V. Krishna, who's not a techie, but who spent 40 years writing a dictionary from scratch, Kannada English dictionary.
Oh,
So we
wow.
worked with him, 40 years. Worked with him, digitized this data, helped him open source it. The entire thing is open source, the engine, the data, etc. So this has, I've typed Hesaru, which means name in Kannada. And this is showing, it shows, it's picked up all the Kannada words that have a phonetic similarity to Hesaru.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this comes from, these phonetic suggestions are generated by another open source project called Varnam, Go Varnam. That's also quite interesting. But you'll see that this is a much more structured dictionary. It looks professional because V. Krishna wrote it as a scholarly professional dictionary. Here,
Wow.
you can see how simple these definitions are, crowdsourced. But this is like an actual proper dictionary.
What
super high.
one would see when you open up a print dictionary, right?
Exactly. So this Alar, V. Krishna's Kannada dictionary is of scholarly quality. I'd say it's one of the largest open data dictionaries in the world. So you'll see that Olam, which is a English Malayalam dictionary, which is 15 years old, and Alar, which is 4 years old, they look pretty much exactly the same because I've used the same templates to render them. So this was a bunch of custom scripts 15 years ago. But when I had to now build this Kannada dictionary, it made no sense to copy paste those scripts and hack them to make it work with Kannada. So that's how I came up with the idea of DictPress. It was a problem that I faced. How do I have one system that works for multiple dictionaries, Indic language dictionaries? So I ended up building this thing called DictPress. It's written in Go, and it's an HTTP server, with which you can create and publish dictionaries that look like this or this. And of course, you can customize it however you want. You can use any templating, it gives you APIs and whatnot. So as I was building it, I realized language in the technical sense, they're just strings, Unicode and Unicode strings. So why Indic languages? If you just treat them as strings, this engine can, and in a dictionary, you map relationship with certain strings to certain other strings, which is words to definition. And then you have metadata, which describe the relationship. It's a noun, it's an adjective, whatever. So these are all actually generic constructs. So then DictPress happened. I built it as a completely generic system, which is fully language agnostic. So you can load data into it in any language, relationships or definitions in any language, and you can quickly publish dictionaries that look like this. So any language in the world, as long as they are just strings. So there are 2 active dictionaries that I maintain running on top of DictPress. So it's not just the engine. One other important aspect of running an online publicly accessible dictionary is that there'll be mistakes, there'll be errors, there'll be words that are not covered. So people would want to, you have to provide an easy means for users to send suggestions, send edits and corrections. So this has a cool admin area. I have a session here logged in. I'm logged into this admin. So DictPress ships with its own admin panel where, you see some statistics once you're logged in. Oh yeah, you can see that there are 1.9 lakh, 190,000 entries in this dictionary.
Oh, wow.
So in the admin view, I get it's basically a CMS, content management system admin for dictionaries. You can see how you can edit a relationship between a definition and a word. You can add new stuff. You can rearrange and reorder. You can edit, delete. You can do anything. And when you have, I don't think I have any pending entries here, but if you enable moderation, it shows up here. Let me see if there are any. Oh yeah, actually there are. So you can approve, reject, you can do all kinds of things. So it's a moderation system plus a
Nice.
content management system rolled into one. And yeah, so this is DictPress. It's a really cool project. I know it's a niche project because how often can you publish dictionaries, right? To publish dictionaries, you need high quality open data. So it's another project of mine where I hope that over the next several years, the Indic language community comes together and we get high quality open dictionary data sets for all Indic languages. And we can use tools like DictPress to publish them. So that's the tool. It's a single binary app. It compiles into a single binary. So you just run the binary and your dictionary is up. It depends on it uses the Postgres database to store. I'll quickly show this also. It's quite clever, Postgres.
Sure.
So it uses two tables in the Postgres database to make it all work. There's an entries table where every single entry, the root word definitions are stored. And there's a relationship table which describes the relation from the entry to entry itself. And all the search magic, like I said earlier, this can work for any language in the world. All that search magic comes from Postgres' cleverness. So DictPress uses Postgres' built-in full text search support tokens. So I think Postgres has inbuilt tokenization for full text search for like 40 languages. Unfortunately, I don't think, I think maybe only Hindi and Bengali are the Indic languages that it's supported, but that's okay. Because of the way Postgres works, you can plug in search tokens for any kind of strings and make it work. So DictPress ships with two phonetic algorithms. One is the phonetic Kannada algorithm, one is the Malayalam algorithm, which allows it to index and work and make search work out of the box for Kannada and Malayalam. So I think somebody had asked that question, right? How did I end up working with language technologies? It was basically this. So when I built Olam in 2010, typing Malayalam was very difficult back then. Today, it's very easy to type Indic languages on your phone, on your computer. There are great keyboards, all kinds of keyboards. So it was very difficult back then. And searching and language and text processing algorithms for Indian languages also practically still don't exist, unfortunately. So in a database, you can easily do a full text search using English words because English tokenization is widely accepted, supported. But those things don't exist for Indic languages, even today, really. So ML phone was the first algorithm I wrote in 2010 for Olam, where you put in a Malayalam word and it creates a phonetic hash for that particular word with English characters. So it's very similar to English metaphone. For instance, if you have a word and you put it to metaphone, you might get something like this. I mean, I've just made this up. This is just pseudocode.
Correct.
So if you misspell this, that also, because it's phonetic, that also will produce the same phonetic hash. So that's the basis of search. Even if you type in a word which sounds similar, but the spelling is off, it can still match the hash. So ML phone basically takes Malayalam words and phonetically hashes it to something that looks like this in English. Now you can put these tokens in the database and make them search. And Indic languages are notorious for spelling variations. We all know how our names can be spelled in so many different ways. TH, DH, TD, all kinds of things, right? So that's how ML phone happened. But because the script, the glyphs for most Indic languages are very similar, the same algorithm can apply to, I think, pretty much all Indian languages. So that's why it's Indic phone. There are two algos that have been added for Kannada and Malayalam, but it's work in progress to support all languages here for the phonetic search thing also. So that is DictPress. It's a project that I really like because I really like dictionaries. But like I said, it's a niche project. But anyway, if you're out there trying to build a dictionary, could be anything, could be a glossary, could be a technical glossary, could be absolutely anything, a thesaurus, sorry. Please try out DicPress.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that with us, Kailash. That's interesting to know about DicPress. So, a very slightly fun question. I've noticed that many of your projects that you work on tend to be the single binary apps itself, right? So, is
Yeah.
is that a fascination, or an ease of use, that let's just ship a single binary to make this happen?
I mean, I really, really dislike bloated software. I have this aversion. Sometimes I feel physical repulsion to bloated, poorly built software. So, because Go enables, as a compiled language, it enables
Yep.
single binaries. I like to package everything to a single binary that you download and you run, and that's it. And I have this aversion really shines when it comes to the front end world, where you download one JavaScript library, it has 5,000 dependencies, which is why that auto suggestion thing that I was showing you earlier, right? The lib I've written is a 400 line standalone JavaScript lib with zero dependencies. You don't even have to use npm. You can just copy paste and use it in your project. So it's not a fascination. I think that's how software used to be. When you had resource constraints back in the day, people put effort into making software optimal. But today, because RAM, CPU, space, it's all cheap, software is bloated. So I really don't like bloated software. And I like to make software that I write as easy as possible to download, install, and use. And single binaries is just one of those means. No
Yeah.
dependencies. Yeah.
That's great. So, switching gears, a bit, and speaking about sustainability in open source, right? I believe, that's something that you believe in as well, in terms of ensuring that open source projects are sustainable, either through means of funding, through means of mentorship or support, etc. And recently we saw that. Zerodha is committed for a pretty large open source fund as well, in helping open source projects, etc. So can you share a little bit more about sustainability and funding for open source projects?
It's a very difficult, I mean, it's a very complex topic. You know how divisive it's become in the recent years. I think historically, free software, because it had the word free, people assumed it to be free of cost. I mean, we all keep repeating this mantra: free as in freedom, not free as in, free beer or whatever. So just because something is free and open source software or free software doesn't mean that its creator is obliged to give it away for free. People are absolutely free to sell open source software, but it should come with the liberties and freedom. However, for whatever historical reasons and maybe the dynamics of sharing, pretty much all open source software ever built is also free of cost. It didn't have to be, it doesn't have to be, and yet it continues to be. Because it's simply the dynamics of usage. If you attach a price tag to your open source software, maybe nobody will even try it out. So that's where that expectation, that historical trajectory is why we've ended up in a place where people, small groups, communities, individuals put in a lot of effort into building and maintaining something out of passion. And very large commercial corporations use them and sometimes abuse those pieces of software and never contribute anything back. So it's a legally, it must be okay, because as long as they adhere to the terms of the license, it's okay. But ethically, there's a problem and everybody accepts. So I can work on open source software because I do it as a hobby, not I don't try to make a living out of it. That is different for a lot of people who expend considerable amounts of their time, which eats into their own ability to make a living, maintaining and building open source software. They should be compensated. They should be fairly compensated. There's no universal mechanism. How do you give money to an open source project, right? What are the norms? How do you value an open source project? These are all unanswered questions. There are many different models that are evolving. Lots of projects have slapped a donation button on their web page, and they've never managed to raise anything, raise any donation. So it's quite complicated. It's just that it's logical and it's ethical to compensate and contribute back to projects that give you value. And especially for corporations, I mean, it makes absolutely no sense to build unicorns and whatever valuations out of massive amounts of open source software and never give anything back. So, as I said, at Zerodha, we always attempted to give back. When we started making a little bit of money, we started giving money. When we started making big money, we increased our commitment. So, we recently launched this thing called FOSS Fund, where we've committed $1 million a year to open source projects
Wow.
globally. And we absolutely plan to up this number once we figure out the dynamics of running a fund. And why are we doing it? As I said, it's logical and it's ethical. And from the perspective of business like Zerodha, it also makes sense. If you're deriving value from the open source ecosystem, you want the ecosystem to thrive and survive. So you need to do whatever. If you don't do it, you're just extracting and leaving it for dead, right? Now that's the business side of it. But purely from a philosophical and ethical side, it's just about fair compensation. You take a lot, you should also give back a little bit, whatever you can.
Awesome, awesome. That's great to know, and that's a huge fund. $1 million for open source software itself and helping it be sustainable, etc. So, one last question for a whole lot of, say, maintainers and people who are, say, creating open source projects, maybe full time, may not be full time. What's your suggestion on what's the best way for them to make it sustainable? And it could be funding, could not be funding, could be in terms of governance or how they manage the project, etc. What are the key things, or the key bullet points to sustainability?
I think it's very difficult. The two most common models of making revenue from open source projects is one is offering support, enterprise support and whatnot, support contracts. The other one is if it's a SaaS like solution, it's offering a cloud SaaS version. So yeah, rather than organizations downloading and self-hosting something, you use the cloud offering. These are the two most common models out there that also work. However, I think the recent examples of some big, much loved open source projects flipping and becoming open core or source available, etc., moving away from open source, I think those have been really fueled by extreme ambitions of extreme valuations, raising massive amounts of venture capital. I mean, it's very difficult to equate the returns expected from massive amounts of venture capital to the value and the spirit of an open source project. So if you have a project and you raise massive amounts of VC capital to figure out business plans to make money around the FOSS project, I think it's kind of doomed. It's okay to raise capital, but so specifically with sustainability for projects who have figured out a way to make revenue is perhaps to keep expectations straight and figure out a governance structure so that the business doesn't end up taking over the open source project and consuming it. Because what will ultimately happen is business takes over the open source project, it's no longer open source, and community trust wanes, adoption wanes. People like the project because it's open source to begin with. So the rug pull doesn't work. Best to see that future, predict that future and create governance structures around any business model that one has to prevent that from happening. Yeah, and not every project is a startup. Not every project has to be a startup. This is a pet peeve of mine. Many of my projects, all of my projects are just projects. Even the ones that tend to have, business potential. Listmonk, for instance, it's a newsletter manager that I've been maintaining for the last 6-7 years. And a large number of people, VCs especially, have reached out saying it should be spun off into a MailChimp-like company. And I've always refused. No, let it stay a project, right? That's the spirit of it. I am able to do that because I'm in a privileged position. But the point is, not everything has to be fit into a startup. Projects can also generate revenue. Not everything has to have a large, a well-charted business trajectory. So I think gaining clarity, having a clear idea of how one would like to monetize their open source project is step one. Be it donations, be it a business model, be it raising funding, whatever. I think having that clarity is most important.
Got it. That's that's really helpful advice for all of the folks, open source creators and maintainers, who are tuning in as well. So we're close to end of this discussion and conversation with Kailash. Before we wrap up, Kailash, any final thoughts? Anything that you want to share with the developers and the ecosystem tuning in today?
I always suck at last words, but maybe I'll just reiterate what I said in the beginning. If you're looking to contribute to open source projects or getting started, don't look for projects. Don't look for ideas. Look for problems around you that bug you, and the solutions to those problems that you create will turn into projects and ideas and maybe even businesses.
Yeah, that's really useful, and one key thing, because I think all of us developers are problem solvers, right? So when we're solving problems, either as as a student, or as a daily job, as a way of living, or we are looking at solving problems that could help with the rest of the ecosystem, that's something which is going to be really great. So thank you so much, Kailash, for taking the time out and joining us in the Open Source Friday India live stream, and one of the first in the many of the series that we are going to have as well. So all of you tuning in, what Kailash showed today was just one of the projects. There's a whole lot many projects that Kailash is working on, like Listmonk and many others as well that he has on the GitHub profile. So do check that out as well. So thank you so much, Kailash, for joining us today.
Thank you, Karan. Thanks for inviting and hosting. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for tuning in for this edition of Open Source Friday India. We're gonna have many more guests from the open source ecosystem. So just stay tuned to the GitHub YouTube channel or to the X profile of GitHub India, x.com GitHub India. We'll be sharing more about the upcoming live streams with many such open source ecosystem leaders and also engineering leaders working very closely with the open source ecosystem as well. So thank you so much once again for joining. And I'm Karan signing off, and I'll see you again in one of the next Open Source Friday streams as well. See you, everyone.